Finally, someone else out there in the world is interested in this and has made a video about it. So I'm really excited to have a look and see where I agree and where I don't agree. Let's get into it.
In the world of tricking, nobody seems to be able to agree. What is a flip? What is considered one flip versus two flips? When someone is performing an off-axis flip, which is most of the time, where do we draw the line? In this video, we're going to look at tricking as well as other movement sports to try to understand what is a flip and how we might have been going about it all wrong from the start. Before we do anything, we'll start with a quiz. Is this a flip?
Yes.
If you said yes, that's good. We agree. But what about these?
I'd probably say yes, it's a form of a flip. Yeah. Yeah, I'd count that as a flip. And yes, I'd count that as a flip. You could say pseudo flip for some of these, but pseudo flip, still some form of flip.
If you said yes to all these, do you know why? And if you said no, this video might change your mind.
If you answered no, do you think that these two tricks look the same?
So I don't think that these two tricks look the same, and that's because he doesn't hold the tuck the whole time in one of them, and it's also 180 degrees short of the landing position of the other one. So we've got a difference in rotation and a difference in shape.
Well, after doing them, I can tell you they definitely don't feel the same. The second one was a lot easier.
In tricking, many people define a flip as the amount of inversions someone has in a skill. They may say something like, if their head went below their hips, or something like that, to imply that they were upside down. But what separated those two skills that I just did was not the amount of inversion. It was the ability to maintain the flipping axis.
I'm not sure what he means by this, the ability to maintain the flipping axis. You can see, I can show the landing positions. One was clearly half a twist more rotated than the other one, and one of them had a tuck the whole time. Those are the clear differences between those two tricks. Now, you could say that holding the shape the whole time is what helps you to maintain the flipping axis, but also I wouldn't even say he's on a flipping axis. This is a vert movement, slightly off axis. It's the shape that makes it look like a flip, nothing else. If you do that same movement and you're not in that tucked shape, you're just kind of open and just twisting, it won't look like a flip at all. So I'm not sure what it means by that point, to be honest.
Whether or not that axis is inverted is not relevant.
I actually agree with this one because I do think what he did there was a pseudo double flip. So it looks like a double flip, but it's not really a double flip at all because his head is above his hips the whole time.
When something is flipping, its orientation oscillates on the axis it's flipping on, meaning it goes one direction and then comes back to its original state. But without getting into too much physics, our bodies are not made like cones. We can make our bodies into different shapes, and therefore we can flip on different axes. And really, that's what separates flipping from twisting. When we backflip, we can only land after about 360 degrees of rotation. But when we twist, we can twist any amount and still be able to land on our feet. And in my opinion, nobody in the movement sports world understands this better than skiers. For someone who's used to tricking terminology, skiing names might sound like a bunch of incoherent jargon, but the only thing that's important to understand is that skiers count the total number of rotations and they deliberate between which one of those rotations is a twist and which is a flip.
Just a note here, skiers often define a flip as the person performing the flip dipping or oscillating on the axis of the flip, like we talked about before. Therefore, you can't just dip your head to the level of inversion on the axis. Your head has to come back up.
In a dub 10, or double 1080, there's 3 rotations. 2 of them is a flip.
All right, 2 of them is a flip. I'd say 2 of them are pseudo flips, or yeah, I guess what we're defining as a flip, which is holding a specific shape that looks like a flip and then rotating into that complete landing.
There's a lot of overlap in skiing terminology names and tricking names, probably due to the beginning of tricking happening close to the creation of free skiing names in the 90s. So now we end up with a cork meaning one thing in tricking and a cork meaning a similar but different thing in skiing, as well as the word flat spin. But we don't really have to worry about any of that. What's cool to understand is that tricks are different based on how many times you flip and how many times you spin, even if the total amount of rotations is the same.
True.
Skiers have found some pretty mind-melting tricks, pushing the boundaries of how many rotations can be done with different amounts of flips. So what does all this mean? Really all that I'm claiming is that we have a fundamental difference between a flip and a twist, aside from simply the level of inversion. And what we're seeing here is that the definition of a flip and the definition of an inversion may not be the same.
I actually agree with what he's getting at. It's just putting it in weird terms. I just think that fundamental difference is shape. Because if we look at that example on the trampoline, it's all about the shape. It's all about holding that tucked position with the knees in right until the end. That's what makes it look like a flip. And this goes for a lot of double flips, especially ones that are off axis. If the shape isn't held, then it doesn't look like a double flip. So I think that's the core of it. Yeah, it's not about inversion, it's more about shape.
You might be able to invert, but not flip, and flip without inverting. Let's take a B-kick as an example. A B-kick is a skill that rotates on the flat spin axis. It looks like this. Now I would argue that skill is not just defined by the level of inversion that it has, because I can do something like this.
I think any kind of rotation combined with inversion can be considered a flip. If we look at a real spider that has rotation to it, then it's as much of a flip as this first example here is.
That looks pretty ridiculous, and I don't think anybody would argue that that was a flip. But you can argue that it was the same amount of inversion as a B-kick and therefore was an invert. Before this video ends, I want to take a moment to go into some classic examples from tricking and see how understanding this definition of a flip might help us out. So tack trip and cheat 16 are two tricks that are often differentiated based on their inversion. If we look at this tack trip from Kaiga, you can see that his head goes below his hips, meaning that he inverted. But then his head in a circular pattern goes below his hips and comes back up before he really finishes the skill. Sure, he lands a little bit low, but you can see that he dipped and was on his way back up, meaning that he's rotating around this flipping axis. If you look at a cheat 16 that he did, you can see that his head still dips below his hips or level with his hips in the skill. His head doesn't come back up. Its lowest point is at the end of the trick when he's already landed on the ground. All this means is that he hasn't initiated any kind of flipping axis.
The head's lowest point being at the end of the trick, I don't think this is any kind of argument towards whether something is a flip or not, because lots of completely inverted moves land with their head way below their hips and it doesn't come back up until they've like stabilized. Think of any short double backflip and they're stumbling around like this, or just any flip that you struggle to get round on, you're gonna land with your head really low. I don't think that's a good argument.
Rather, he's twisting, and because he's twisting so many times in cheat 16, he's just tilting. Maybe you could consider this an execution error, but because of the nature of the skill, the way that he's twisting and spotting his kick, he's not initiating any flip the same way that he's doing in a tack trip.
This shouldn't define whether something's a flip or not, because there's lots of tricks like full up, for example, where you don't flip at all in the beginning, but then you flip later in the move. So making the argument that because the inversion is late, then it's not a flip, I don't think that means much. Now that's just an opinion thing, but I don't think saying that the timing of the inversion defines whether or not it's a flip, because there's lots of flips that have really late inversion and we all count them as flips.
He's not initiating any flip the same way that he's doing in a tack trip. We can look at a tack full in from Zen as well. First of all, wow. If you look at the axis his tack full is on, he maintains that axis in the second flip and his head dips and comes back up before landing.
It does not. There's not a lot to say about that. I can just show the video. I can show the position he lands in. His head doesn't come back up before landing. He lands with his head at its lowest possible point.
In this video, I've been saying the head dipping and going down and up, but really what I'm trying to say is that the head is completing a circle. So obviously the more horizontal the flip is, the more horizontal the circle is. When you do a straight back flip, your head goes straight down and straight up. And when you do a B kick, your head goes in a completely horizontal circle. I think this tack full in is something that's on the line of whether or not it is a completed double flip. but you can just look at the slanted circle that his head makes in attack full and then repeating that circle in the second flip.
I don't think it's really fair to say that this trick does not count because his second flip wasn't inverted when the tack full was on the same axis. Maybe this isn't a tack full in, back out, but it is a double flipping tack full in, and that's pretty cool. And then there's other examples where we can apply this theory and understand why some double flips might not count, where the tricker does something with their body to pull themselves out of the flipping axis and sort of bail out early, landing on their feet before they should have.
Landing on their feet before they should have. I think this point's really interesting because if we look back at Zen's tack full in, you'll see his foot actually lands in the exact same position. They're both 90 degrees away from a complete landing. The reason that Zen's looks like a double flip and Morteza's doesn't isn't because of that landing position. It's more because of the shape throughout the landing. Zen maintains that really tight tuck shape. Even though his arms come out, he's still like this. So it still looks like a flip. Whereas Morteza is already loosening up and coming out of that shape. So it doesn't present as a flip anywhere near as much, even though they landed in the exact same position. So for me, this is just another argument towards shape being one of the most crucial things, maybe even more important than rotation, as this example shows that you can under-rotate and it will still present as a double flip if you are able to maintain the correct shape.
Because if you remember earlier, when we were talking about less inverted flipping axes, there's still only one point where you can land on your feet, and it's when you finish the flip. Now I want to hear what you think.
This video's really helped me to come to a simplified way to identify a flip. I think it comes down to these three key factors, and you don't need all three of them, but you do need two in combination, and it needs to be a specific combination. The first of those three factors is inversion. Does your head go beneath your hips at some point in the movement? The second one is shape. Where are your knees and quads in relation to your chest? So for the shape to be correct, to create a flip when there isn't inversion involved, I think one or both of the knees need to be this height or above. So it's all about where your quad and knee is in relation to your chest. If it's a bit further away, twisting in this shape is not going to look like a flip. And the third one is rotation. You need roughly 360 degrees of rotation for it to look like a flip. If I take the other two factors, inversion and shape, and I do something like this, it doesn't look like a flip. Even though I got my head to around the level of my hips, so I had enough inversion, and I pulled in both knees so I made the right shape, I didn't have any rotation, so it didn't look like a flip. Have a look at different flips and pseudo flips and see if you can find something that breaks this rule that I've come up with. DM me on Instagram with what you find and leave a comment below if there's anything you agree with, disagree with, or if you have your own theory about what makes a flip a flip. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.